Thank you guys for joining us today. I'm Paul Martin. I'm the CEO of 10 Capital. I want to thank everybody for joining us for another topic on family offices. Today we have with us Brianna Mariolle and Dean Horowitz of IEQ Capital, and they're going to talk to us about how to use technology in a family office. We see many of our family offices turning to technology to reduce costs, improve productivity and quality. And with us today, we're going to have a discussion with them. Feel free to put questions in the chat box. We'll make this interactive and looking forward to catching up with you today. With that, let me have Brianna and Dean come up. And guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us more about what you guys do. And then let's go and kick off into your topics there.
Sounds great. Thank you for that introduction, Paul. As he mentioned, my name is Brianna Mariolle. I am a director here at IEQ Capital. I've been with IEQ for around 3 years, and I've worked with ultra high net worth clients for over a decade. A little bit about IEQ. We were founded in 2019. We currently manage around 23.5 billion of assets for about 1,100 families. I would say that our typical client size is in the $20 to $50 million range, but we work with everyone from 5 million to billionaires. So it's quite a diversity of client situations and sizes. In particular, in addition to providing advice to families across all aspects of investing, everything from very safe, conservative, liquid fixed income to the more speculative Bitcoin. I particularly specialize in helping families achieve their wealth transfer goals based on their available options and circumstances.
Cool. So my name is Dean Horowitz. I'm a partner and I'm the chief operating officer at IEQ Capital. My background, I've really worked in wealth management space for really my entire career. I graduated in 2008, which was an awesome time to graduate from Cal. Wanting to go into finance, I ended up in wealth management, which was kind of day one of a job, kicked off with kind of the 3 leading partners from Merrill Lynch breaking away and starting their own RIA. So I worked on the client-facing side for a long time. I found more passion and interest on the operations and technology side of business. At that time, fintech didn't really exist. The systems were a lot slower. Excel was sort of core to everything that we did. And kind of as my career progressed, more interesting opportunities from a tech perspective to really grow our business efficiently came online, and I found a lot of interest in that. So we sold that company, which was Luminous Capital, to First Republic in 2012. We stayed at First Republic for about 7 years, and then we broke away and started IEQ Capital in 2019, as Brianna mentioned. So I've seen a lot of development, obviously, in the space of technology. We have utilized tech and are continuing to utilize tech and look at the new advancements throughout time. So it's been a pretty interesting journey, and I think I've seen how much efficiency and how many clients, for example, you could manage and view and understand with real systems in place versus before. So we'll dive more into the specifics in a bit, but that's my basic background.
Yeah. And I know, Hall called this out, but just to emphasize, we're very happy to take questions along the way. The more interactive this is, the more useful it will be for everyone. And that's our goal at the end of the day. So I think to kick it off, today's theme is technology in a family office. And I have found when onboarding clients or talking to prospects that their biggest focus is often on performance systems. Clients want to be able to know their total net worth. They want to be able to break it down into sub asset classes. They want to be able to see performance from multiple different perspectives and level of granularity. So I think, Dean, this is something that you led the charge with IEQ and reviewing and picking what performance system we use. So could you share a little more about what's out there, what the pros and cons are, why we ended up where we are?
Yeah, totally. So when I think of the landscape, there's really, I'll call it 3 major players in the performance reporting system space. The first one's Adapar, which I'll get to last. The second is Orion, and the third is Black Diamond. Black Diamond is really a spinoff from what was Advent, which was kind of the original performance reporting system way back when. We used to use Advent as a firm, and we converted from Advent to Adapar while we were at First Republic. And we actually selected Adapar when we launched IEQ Capital. From a pricing standpoint, Adapar is more expensive than the other two, but I think the efficiencies you can get out of a system like Adapar outweigh the cost and the additional cost associated with it. So the big pros from an Adapar perspective are the following. One, it truly was designed for family office at the onset. So it has ownership structure that sits at a household to legal entity to individual to account level. So you can slice and dice the data as you see fit on the fly. So a lot of the times we've seen families trying to do this themselves in Excel, and it becomes this massive sheet that is honestly filled with errors over time, and nobody can really audit it, and it gets passed from person to person. So like what's really cool about Adapar is it's a stabilized database. You can build it, and it gets all of the data feeds that you need from the various custodians. So while most of the assets at IEQ Capital are custodied at Fidelity, we get feeds from probably another 100 different custodians that all come in that allow us to create holistic pictures for clients from a full balance sheet reporting perspective. And that's been super advantageous. The other part that I really like Adapar for is it was built as a cloud platform originally. There was no conversion from an older platform, which means there's just a lot less legacy associated with it. So their ability to turn out improvements on a consistent basis that really impact kind of the entire environment has been super beneficial for us.
And then when you think about the other ones, was there any particular catalyst that led us away from them to Adapar?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the customization in the end product for the other two that doesn't really get there for us, right? So I think of it as it's customization at scale is what Adapar allows you to do. The other ones are a little bit more rigid in terms of the templates and the outputs that you can create. Well, Adapar actually allows you to like write specific attributes throughout the process. So you can think of it as I want a custom attribute that allows me to slice things by regions, for example, for a real estate portfolio. Okay, well, that's something that we can create pretty easily and layer on and then slice performance that way and actually present it that way. And it's basically declarative in the sense that like you don't need coding background to write these attributes. You can just go in and write formulas similar to you would do in Excel in many ways.
So we have a question from the audience. Question is, have you developed any software in-house? If so, to address what function?
Most of the software we've developed in-house is really about connecting the various systems in our tech stack. So if you think of our tech stack, we primarily use Adapar and Salesforce as our kind of core competencies. Adapar is really our books and records. Salesforce is point of entry for the various people from an entry perspective throughout the firm. So the software we've created in-house is about better integrating those systems. So regardless of where you're entering data or you're looking at data, it's the same across systems and it's real time. So I wouldn't call it software per se, but I would say it is some Python scripts that allow us to sort of connect and flow the data on a regular basis.
Would you say that software helps you reduce the headcount in a family office, or it just improves quality or productivity?
I think it depends. So the hard thing with family office, if you're asking the question around, okay, I am an individual that has $100 million or $200 million, the hard thing with setting up a family office is like any of these softwares, Adapar, Orion, Black Diamond, are not easy to manage and manipulate. So we internally have a team of 3 individuals that are dedicated to basically maintaining the data quality in Adapar, and everything flows through it. You can make mistakes in it that have downstream effects that are pretty negative, and you need somebody to continuously kind of just, I'll call it, look at the exceptions to a degree, right? This is all data flowing from various places. All of these have good tools associated with it that help you, but you really do need people. So to answer your question of like, does it save cost and time? Yes, versus doing it in Excel, but you also kind of are forced to have somebody there that can really manage these softwares. It's not just a point and click and go situation. We've had a lot of conversations with clients who sometimes will be managing a few $100 million for them, for example, but they're also wanting Adapar to centralize it. We've actually helped them try and onboard Adapar themselves, where they go hire Adapar in addition to us using Adapar and reporting on the assets for the portion of the business that we actually use. And in most cases, they end up being frustrated because the setup isn't that easy and it is complicated. It gets what you want, but you gotta have to have real thought around how you want it to be set up. Otherwise, you can paint yourself into a corner pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think
So
that the productivity and economies of scale, like the productivity is there. The economies of scale wouldn't necessarily happen if you're running your own family office, like without interacting with anybody else. My previous firm was not technologically savvy in the slightest. And so when I came here, one of the benefits of having all of this technology and these systems in place is I was able to have double the amount of clients I had at my previous firm without having an actually increased workload, because, you know, Dean was mentioning, you know, having systems, wanting to flow through and emphasize that continuity and reliability of it. And that makes a huge difference. If you're not in a multi-family office like we are, and you're in a solo family office, you still need that personnel to be running the system, but you don't really necessarily have economies of scale because it's not like you're taking on new like families that you're working with.
Right. So the next question is, does Adapar or Orion or Black Diamond have modules to integrate with any tax software for annual reporting requirements like K1s?
Yes and no. So Adapar has a document portal, but it's very manual in terms of you posting it. And so did the others in reality. Tax reporting, there are a few people out there from a tech stack perspective that can help with really the gathering of it. I'm talking more about the gathering than anything else. And I'll come back to it on K1s versus liquid tax reporting. They're kind of 2 different animals. In terms of K1s, like the gathering of those K1s, like let's imagine you had 100 private investments and they all have different independent logins and they're all over the place. The 3 solutions out there that we've looked at, and none of them are perfect yet, and they do integrate with each of those 3 softwares from a data perspective. But from an actual like gathering of the K1s and putting it onto a single place and doing that in an automated fashion, Arch, Canoe, and Mirador are the 3 firms that do what is basically PDF scrubbing and crawling into portals. So the way that they work is you essentially log in, you set up a contract with them, you give them all of your interested party access to all of these different places. There's a lift in the beginning, but then at that point, they go in and they actually pull down the documents and put them into a centralized place. And they create transactions for you to take what is something that doesn't have a feed, right? And a liquid investment doesn't have a feed from a transactions perspective, and it puts those into one of those systems, Adapar, Orion, Black Diamond, in a way that allows you to see more holistic family office reporting.
I've heard some family offices are looking for pacing software. They manage capital calls and they're using Backstop. Any experience there?
Not with Backstop specifically. The way that we manage pacing software, there's really two options. One is Adapar has something native within it, which is kind of an add-on, which is a firm that they acquired a while ago. They call it Navigator within Adapar currently. It doesn't work perfectly for our use cases because what they do is they kind of look at general markets and say, okay, great, I've got a real estate fund that is a vintage XYZ, and they've got a pacing model associated with that, and you allocate to that, and then it looks at everything associated with that. What we do internally is we actually look at each of the underlying funds and have relationships with the managers such that we call them on a regular basis and actually get details from a cash flow perspective, and then fold all that together essentially into Adapar and allow us to track where we expect capital calls or distributions to be on a quarter-over-quarter basis going forward.
We've also created like an online portal for our clients and their CPAs. So that way they're not going to all these individual sites and physically pulling down everything on their own for all the IEQ related investments, whether it's 1099s or K1s. It just all goes onto the one portal that we then give the client CPA access to, which is also great because now the client is not acting as a middleman for, you know, something that they shouldn't need to be.
There is a comment in the chat box about the tax accounting. It's a real pain point from a manual gathering. Thanks for the Arch, Canoe, and Mirador recommendations. And I do hear from others that trying to pull information out of your tax system or tax software is something a lot of people are trying to do for various reasons.
Yeah, it's there are a variety of tech firms trying to solve for this problem currently. Someone will figure it out and actually win. I don't know who that will be at some point in time. We'll find out.
What are the key packages that are doing that you can call out?
I think it's the same firms, right? Because they're getting access to the data. It's sort of their next iteration. And like if AI, which I know is like one of the topics we wanted to touch on, is going to work well somewhere, it's taking what is PDF data, reading it, synthesizing the data, and putting it into tables that you can actually export in a clever way. Like there's real opportunity there. I think AI personally applied to call it market trends and making decisions on portfolios is pretty far off to be totally hands-off related to making those decisions. But in terms of like the pure language component of being able to read something, digest it, cross-reference, understand where anomalies are, and be able to spit out information, I think that is what all of these firms were doing over time, and now they just have a stronger tool to apply to it.
Yeah.
What do you see in the alternative finance space as far as software packages? We've had a couple come on this show and talk about them, Copia Wealth Studios, Clockwork, and others. But what's your take on alternative finance management platforms?
What do you mean exactly by alternative finance platform?
Where are they adding value into the process? Which ones are actually providing useful tools for the family office?
Do you mean like alternative platforms where someone can like log onto the platform and see a whole bunch of different investment options? Is that they
Well,
can
alternative investments. So it's not the standard stock. It's a special startup, or there's something where there's not a lot of data out there for it. You have to enter all of it yourself, and you're trying to value it. You're trying to manage it. You're trying to understand the tax consequences. Those type of things come in a lot with the alternative finance packages.
So you're talking about like if I've gone out and made an angel investment in a brand new company and now I want to track that value over time. Is that
That's right?
Okay. I can speak to how we handle it here, and then you can say how it's done elsewhere. So with our clients, we like to add that to their total net worth tracking. so when we focus on performance, we look specifically at the recommendations that we're making on the assets that we're managing, but that's, not 100% of the client's world. So we do like to have a net worth allocation that can show everything from like their homes to the angel investments that they have made elsewhere. And so that's typically the way that we handle it, is we manually create it and add it to Addepar. But I don't know what else is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of put those in the same camp, assuming we're understanding what you're asking. I don't think there's no single one I could recommend that's actually cracked the code on this particularly yet. I think that they're all working towards it, and I think that you're going to see an aggregation of these or acquisitions of these companies from these bigger firms over time. So like, I would not be surprised if I saw the Black Diamond Orions and Addepars start to acquire these firms, and they've done that historically for other parts of the business. So like trading platforms, for example, have been acquired by some of these big performance aggregators because that's where they're trying to centralize all of the functions in a relationship.
Yeah, I think in general, finance has just always been a little bit slower on adapting new technology. And that this is a great example of that. I think, even when it comes to AI, that is proving true. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing when you're dealing, with people's assets. That's a very critical part of their lives, right? Like, you need money to survive, you need it to retire, you need it to live comfortably, to be charitable, to enjoy life. And so I would much prefer to be a little bit slower on making this progress rather than develop some AI program that, incorrectly logs K1s. And now 5 years later, you're in a huge mess with the IRS, right? Like, that will make your life more difficult, not easier.
Right. What other software applications do you see being used by family offices that are helpful here?
Yeah, listen, I think the biggest things, your core accounting engine is really this performance reporting system, right? So I think making that decision and building off of it is probably number one if you're talking about it like a single family office. Outside of that, I think a trading platform is probably important. So if you're having a CIO internally and you've got some sort of models, being able to execute on that across a whole bunch of different legal entities so that you actually have the same performance in all of them is super important. Other softwares that are a little bit more on our family office side, like true family office side, we use a software called Vanilla, which kind of allows you to see the estate flow through from an assets perspective, start to finish. We also use eMoney internally for Monte Carlo simulations to start just thinking about long-term just money transfer over time and stress cases for portfolios and things like that. So there are other competitors within each of those. eMoney has 2 or 3 competitors. Vanilla has 2 or 3 competitors, but I think each of those are softwares in the space that are pretty interesting to utilize. But if I were opening a family office and I had limited resources and people, I think the Arch or Canoe would be an important thing if I had a lot of non-custodian feeding assets that I wanted to track over time. I think it would be a super important element as part of it.
What's your take on ESG software? A couple of years ago, I saw quite a number of software products come on the line to measure and monitor ESG investments. Where did those go? Are they still around, or is that still a thing that people spend their time on? What's your view of ESG?
So I can start this one and then you can take it. I am one of the founding members of the ESG committee at our firm. And I think, a couple of years ago, there was a huge focus on ESG. People were very optimistic about it, really wanted to dive into it. The issue that has arisen is that for every single person, ESG means something different, right? Like, does ESG mean that you don't want any oil and gas, or does it mean that you want a certain number of women on all of the boards that you invest in? And so when you have very, very different potential goals all under the same umbrella, it makes it incredibly challenging to come out with like a cookie cutter. This is going to exactly do what you need. And what you really need is something that's much more customizable. For example, we work with Parametric, which is a they do tax managed, tax sensitive index equity funds. And for our clients who are ESG, they have like a multi-page proposal for them to fill out, which says exactly like, are they anti-firearms or weapons? Are they like pro in another area? And so that is really the best way that we've found to help clients meet their unique and specific ESG goals.
What do you think of the status of ESG today is among family offices in general? Is it increasing? Is it staying flat, or is it declining?
So I would say what often happens with these types with ESG is that when everyone is making a lot of money, people tend to be very generous around ESG because sometimes or a lot of times the investments are expected to make less money, but you're like, I'm comfortable with that because, you know, my net worth is at such a place that I can fulfill all of my other lifestyle goals. When you have years like 2022, where there's massive corrections in markets, people tend to pull back from it. And so we saw a pullback in 2022, and then it continued on into 2023 because then in the alternative markets, everything tightened up. We didn't have a lot of transactions. People were feeling very cash flow tight. And so far this year, I would expect that to start to upswing again. Markets are doing pretty well. We're starting to see alternative investments like open up a little bit more. We've seen more IPOs in the market. So that would be my expectation of an increased interest going forward, but it absolutely ebbs and flows relative to the markets.
What other software do you see being used by your family offices out there that they find helpful?
Well, we use Salesforce a lot. I can talk about that.
Yeah.
So when you have 1,100 families across the firm, even though I'm obviously only working with a tiny subset of that, we need multiple systems that need to talk to each other. One of them is Salesforce, which Dean mentioned earlier is sort of like our centralized information base. So that's where we keep all of our like confidential information that we need to help clients like open up a bank account open up an investing account at Fidelity, or to coordinate with their, mortgage company if they're trying to like do a cash out refi or buy a new house. And so a lot of the personalized, unique information on the clients is stored there. And then, as we mentioned, we use Addepar for performance, and then Fidelity to custody assets.
Great. If there are any more questions from the audience, please go ahead and post it in the chat box. I think we got one now. Piggybacking off of the ESG investment comment within family office investment broadly, has there been a pullback from any specific asset classes such as venture? What are you seeing there on the sector front for ESG?
Pullbacks from specific industries. I would say that there has been a very significant pullback in the VC and PE space. Last year was really interesting. So typically when we work with fund managers, we'll take 6 to 12 months to fundraise for a given vintage. And over the past 2 years, we've seen that expand, more to 12 to 18 months, simply because of this increasing concerns around liquidity because of dips in markets and fewer transactions. So VC and PE, I would say, were the primary spaces. Last year, real estate, there was a huge pullback. I've seen my clients start to shift and think like, well, now that real estate is a little bit distressed, this is actually a great time to start think about going back in. So it is a little bit of timing. Credit is super popular right now because you can get a really, really amazing yield. As the Fed starts to drop, rates, I would expect credit. People will start to rotate out of that and into other areas such as VC, PE, real estate, that become more appealing as debt becomes cheaper. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think that's our final question. Thank you guys for such a great presentation. with that, we're going to hope to have you back for a follow-up soon. And with that, we'll move into our first company presentation. We have with us today Windmill Cardiovascular. Sam Liang will be launching his slides and giving us a current pitch there as well. So with that, Sam, go ahead and kick off with your presentation, and we'll be looking for further questions there from the audience on that.
Great, thank you all very, very much. I don't know if everybody can see the first slide. It's coming up all right?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Well, listen, thanks for everybody joining. I'm Sam Liang. I'm a business advisor to Windmill. I'm also an operating partner at a Austin-based private equity firm called Revival Healthcare Capital. I'm here with Jeff Goheen. He's a director of engineering for Windmill, and we're presenting on behalf of Dr. Richard Smalling, who's the CEO of Windmill. He's also the co-founder. He's busy. He's a full-time practicing cardiologist who's busy treating patients today. We're going to cover today Windmill that's developing a transformational left ventricular assist device, or LVAD, that will improve and extend the lives for end-stage heart failure patients. Next slide. The unmet need that we're addressing are the 6 million individuals with heart failure in the US. It costs the healthcare system over $30 billion annually. Now, there's a subset of these specific patients, about 50,000 of them, that are end stage. It represents about a $6.4 billion TAM in the US alone, and they're at end stage heart failure that either need one of two treatments, a heart transplant or a device called the left ventricular assist device, or LVAD. Unfortunately, due to lack of hearts and deficiencies in the LVAD technology, less than 10% of patients get an LVAD, leaving over 40,000 patients with a very poor quality of life, and they just basically will sit in the hospital and die. It's actually a very sad thing to say. Going to the bottom of the slide, the primary reason why LVADs have had such limited adoption is there's actually only one product on the market today globally. It's a product called Avid. It's a HeartMate 3 technology, and it's based upon what's called a continuous flow pump. So think of a blender, an impeller that's rotating constantly at 3,000 to 5,000 RPMs, and that's what actually pulls the blood through the system. Now, these impeller-based systems, it damages the blood and it degrades what's known as von Willebrand factor. And it's been highly correlated and published that with the damage of von Willebrand factor, there's a cascade of downstream events that result with these patients, a third of them having a very high rate of adverse events, GI, stroke, and infection. And over 90% of these patients have to be rehospitalized. So this is a very meaningful issue for the US healthcare system to deal with it. And it's Windmill's goal to change that for patients worldwide. Next slide, please. So the solution that Windmill's developed is called the TORVAD, and it's an LVAD that simulates the human heart. The technology up on the upper left-hand side consists of two ceramic pistons that are enclosed in titanium case that pumps in a very pulsatile fashion in synchrony with the patient's activities. It has AI algorithms that sense the heart rate, pressure, and several other variables that either speeds up or slows down the pump based upon the patient's activity. If the patient's walking fast, it'll speed up. If the patient's sitting, it'll slow down, just like what the human heart does. Going to the middle of the slide, it's very gentle. It doesn't damage the blood. There's been extensive testing comparing the HeartMate 3 with the TORVAD, and it shows that as the pump speed of HeartMate 3 increases, it damages the von Willebrand factor. The final comments on the right-hand side is that because it's not on continuously, the TORVAD draws a lot less power, so it has a much smaller system requirements in terms of its battery. It's about a third the size and weight of the current HeartMate 3 by Avid, and it makes it a lot more patient-friendly. At the end, it's technology that we believe will improve the outcomes through the reduction of adverse event and improve patient and physician adoption. Let me go to the next slide, please. So here's a video clip comparing the two systems side by side. So TORVAD is on the right-hand side, and it's pumping in a very pulsatile fashion like your heart. you can see the beads going up and down just as your heart beats. Notice on the monitor, you can see the heart rate BPM, blood beats per minute. It increases as the Torvad pumps faster and increases blood flow through your system as the heart rate, and in addition to that, as the heart rate comes down from 100 down to 70, you can also see that the Torvad pumps slower and the flow rate also slows down. Now, the reason why it's able to accomplish this is because it has a lead here that's connected to the heart. So it's a smart pump. As I mentioned earlier, as your heart rate activity increases, if you're playing with your kids, Torvad senses it and it begins to pump faster so that more blood is flowing through your body. Conversely, if you are slowing down and sit down or lay down, the heart rate goes down and the Torvad slows down. So on this same demonstration, I want to draw your attention to the left-hand side, which is the HeartMate 3. So besides the very large size, as you can see, there's no lead to the heart, and the pump pumps continuously at the same rate regardless of the patient's activity. So if the patient, again, is playing with the kids, the heart rate would go up, but the pump would not keep pumping the blood it would continue to pump blood at the same rate, which would result in not enough blood flow getting to the body. And patients will report when they try to get very active with the HeartMate 3, they get lightheaded and dizzy. Conversely, if the patient lays down, the HeartMate 3 can potentially call it overpump. And the patient at rest, sometimes they report that they feel constant pressure in their head and their body because their blood is coming through at a very constant rate. So the last thing I'll point out on this loop is note the gentle pumping action of the water gel beads through the Torvad and how they are undamaged and intact. With the HeartMate 3, because it's got the impeller, the blender type design that I mentioned, the same water gel beads get chewed up into very small pieces. This is the damage that causes the 1 bilirubin factor to degrade and contributes to the very high 30% event rate of stroke, GI bleeds, rehospitalizations. Because Torvad doesn't damage the blood, it can greatly reduce this adverse event rate that patients are encountering and therefore save patients and physicians quite a bit of issues in terms of rehospitalization. Let me go to the next slide, please. So in summary, this is a device that simulates the human heart, has continuous flow, reducing blood damage and adverse events overall. And so if you look at the Torvad on the right-hand side, it's a very small system compared to the HeartMate 3 on the left side of the system. Next slide. The company's made tremendous progress with funding to date. There are 3 generations of products that have been designed. There have been a number of filed patents. Over 50 animals and cadavers have been implanted with the device showing proof of concept. It's been presented and published at numerous presentations globally. The company has assembled a world-class scientific advisory board, and support was actually validated for the device as it won the American College of Cardiology Innovation Pitch Challenge in 2022. Next slide, please. The current US TAM alone is $6.4 billion, whereas the annual realized revenue by HeartMate 3 is $600 million in the United States and $1.1 billion globally. That's what Abbott realizes today as a single player. There is healthy reimbursement for the device. And as we move from the left side of the device of this chart to the right side of the device of the chart, we've seen that and we've heard from many physicians through extensive voice of customer feedback that if Torvad were available today, it would take share and expand actually the market for LVADs, driving revenues to well over $1 billion post-launch. Next slide. What the company is doing currently, it's raising $7 million in Series C financing. The use of funds and proceeds is to hire a full-time CEO, as Dr. Smalling is still a practicing full-time cardiologist. It's to finalize the commercial grade design for the Torvad, and it's as well as develop the clinical protocol for its first in human clinical. Of note, exits in the LVAD space, there have been two. They've all been in the billion-dollar range. When St. Jude was acquired by Thoratec for $3.3 billion, and Medtronic purchased Heartware for $1.1 billion. The exit dynamics are good. There are many strategics that have this as a call point. They're interested in heart failure as an overall investment strategy. What we need to do as a company is get the company to a first in human clinical to show proof of concept. Last slide, if you go to the last slide, I thought we would just leave you with the overall feedback from heart failure key opinion leaders. They've all universally commented that if Torvad were available today, it would become their frontline therapy over HeartMate 3. It would further expand the market by improving outcomes and quality of life for patients globally. Next slide. Thank you very, very much for everybody's time. And if there's any specific questions, we can address them now. Here's our contact information for myself and Dr. Smalling if you have a continued interest. Thank you all.
Yes, if anybody has a question, please put it in the chat box. My first question is how long do people currently survive on the current HeartMate system, and how long would they survive on the windmill version?
So on the HeartMate system today, most individuals will get an LVAD, and they would typically live 2 to 5 years, call it. LVADs are used for two purposes. One, it's called a bridge to transplant. So people will get an LVAD while they're on a wait list until they get a heart transplant, in which case it's a shorter period of time. But there are patients who unfortunately do not get a heart transplant, in which case the LVAD becomes, it converts to what's called destination therapy. And it becomes really what they need to survive long term. The current data would say, as I mentioned, 2 to 5 years is what the current patients would have. We would believe to be proven out that with the Torvad, they could actually live quite longer, namely because they would have reduced complication rates of less stroke, less GI bleeds, and less rehospitalization.
So what's the reliability of the windmill device? The testing so far, what does it indicate?
Yeah, so a couple of several different types of testing have been done, and I'll ask Jeff Goheen to also come on to make some additional comments, as he was the one that drove much of the testing. But I would say from a functional testing perspective, the company has accumulated functional testing that would demonstrate well over 40 years of durability. And that testing is continuing on to continue to show ongoing durability for the devices. They've done numerous, over 40 or 50 animal implants, Hall, to show the rate responsiveness of the device as well as the durability. I don't know, Jeff, if there's anything else that you'd like to comment.
No, you covered it. We've done a full system reliability testing of about up to 2 years. So that's the battery, the controllers with the full pump. And then we've done some long-term pin on disc testing that has ensured that the device wear points will last for over 40 years. So yeah, much longer than these patients are expected to live. So very good reliability tests.
That's great. And what do these systems sell for on the open market? If a company's acquiring you, what kind of revenue would they be getting per unit?
Yeah, so LVADs have been around for quite a while, and that's why there hasn't been much innovation in them. The actual devices generally are reimbursed for the actual device about $100,000 to $120,000. The actual procedure for the implantation and the care of an LVAD, CMS reimburses close to $200,000 for it. So there's quite a healthy, call it margin, for hospitals to do the procedure. The reimbursement is not the issue. with why physicians, aren't doing the procedure. They don't put them in the patients for two reasons. One, patients, when they see the system, it's large, it's heavy currently today, and they say, nope, I just don't want to, deal with that. And then number two, it's been, again, highly reported of the adverse event rates. And as the physicians, are disclosing to the patients saying, look, you've got a third of a chance of having a stroke or GI bleed, patients, again, won't opt out for it. And also from a patient candidacy perspective, physicians, may not offer it to patients.
Great. Okay. I think we're at the end of our time. Great presentation, guys. Appreciate that and great questions. So with that, let's go ahead and move to our next presenter. We have with us also EndoShunt, Tyler Zanin. Tyler, if you can go ahead and launch your slides, we'll check to see when they're ready.
Hi, I'm actually not Tyler Zanin. I am presenting. I'm the president and CTO, Michael. Good to meet you all.
Oh, great. We see your slides. You're ready to go.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hello, my name is Michael. I am the president and CTO of EndoShunt Medical, and together we give trauma surgeons the gift of time so that they can give trauma patients the gift of life. Our team was inspired by a problem that has become too common in the field of trauma surgery. Time to death from internal bleeding, known in the medical community as hemorrhage, is often less than the time that it takes for surgeons to find the source of the abdominal injury. This leaves surgeons in the helpless position of knowing that they can save patients, but not having the time that they need in order to do so. Now, abdominal hemorrhage can happen to anyone at any point in your life. Common causes include car accidents, gunshot wounds, and surgical errors. 1.75 million people globally will die on the operating table due to this issue every year. Of those that survive, 60% will suffer life-changing complications. And if you're one of the lucky ones who survives, you can look forward to months of painful recovery caused by the secondary trauma of current treatment methods. EndoShunt is the solution. We give trauma surgeons the ability to gain targeted, rapid control over abdominal bleeding. EndoShunt is inserted through the femoral artery or vein, passed into the aorta or IVC, and deployed to occlude blood flow from the inside. EndoShunt is length adjustable in its occlusion zone and can be deployed or removed in as little as 30 seconds, leaving absolutely no trace inside of the body. On tests of simulated traumatic vascular injuries, our simulated patient lost 1 liter of blood every 90 seconds. At this rate of blood loss, the patient would die after just 3 minutes. Using our fully functioning prototypes, manufactured by the manufacturer we're going to market with, in as little as 30 seconds, EndoShunt can be deployed to control patient bleeding, preventing their death. Several devices are used by trauma surgeons to try to address these issues of hemorrhage control, but none of them were designed for this purpose, and so all of them fall far short of what is needed in trauma surgery. Packing is a way for surgeons to place pressure on a wound, but it is extremely invasive and does not always work. Aortic cross-clamping and its less invasive counterpart, balloon occlusion of the aorta, cut off blood supply to the entire lower body. Whereas EndoShunt is safe for extended use, only affects a specific area, and can be deployed non-operatively, leading to better patient outcomes. Now, EndoShunt has cornered the market on several critical features of our device design, including the use of an endovascular shunt, versatility features of our shunt once it is deployed, and key elements of our catheter, allowing it to be deployed without a guide wire, facilitating its use in the trauma industry. This device came out of a push from Vanderbilt University to match physicians who've identified a problem with resources capable of creating a real-world solution. Our team consists of myself on the engineering side, bringing my background helping numerous medical technologies to market through my work at Merge Medical Device Studios. Tyler Zanin leads our product development, having over a decade in the space at avid and Medline. And our co-founder, Olivia Busk, she brings her experience at industry leader McKinsey & Company to lead our strategy and apply that business expertise to this team of engineers and trauma surgeons. And last but certainly not least, Milad and Jeremy are our two trauma surgeon co-founders. They have been intimately involved in every step along the development process and currently lead our medical community engagement and device testing. Together, we're poised to capture this industry's excitement. And this industry is rapidly growing. We gained exclusive access to the American College of Surgeons Trauma Quality Improvement Program. Using this detailed data set, we were able to ascertain that our beachhead market, the situations in which it's endoshunt or patient death, is $366 million. Following an initial targeted launch in this space with these indications of use, we'll expand to more indications of use in which its endoshunt is the beneficial device, but maybe not the only option. And that expands our market size to $612 million. From there, we will then expand internationally and then move to other areas of medicine. And it's important to understand that endovascular shunting is a platform technology. While we have an initial focus on traumatic hemorrhage control, we have spoken with hundreds of physicians across medicine, and there is a resounding need in transplant, oncology, OBGYN, and others for the targeted control of blood flow within the body in a minimally invasive manner. This expands our market size far beyond the confines of the trauma industry. And we have taken into account every step along the value chain, making sure that endoshunt is priced at a price point that leads to benefit for all. So at $6,000 a unit, which is our current target price, we have almost a 90% gross margin. Hospitals get reimbursed almost $26,000 every time they open our package. Every time they use our device, the insurance companies reimburse hospitals at almost $26,000, heavily incentivizing the hospitals to use that. And then they reimburse at such a high rate because we prevent down the road complications, which allow our device to reduce the total cost to insurers as well and payers as well. To date, we have raised $366,000, and we're looking to raise another $2 million to get us to FDA clearance. We have a convertible note out, and we're currently looking to raise that in the next few months. We're getting to the point of full subscription at this point. So we're looking to close in the next couple of months. And I want to highlight that it's rare, even in the medical device space, that an investment can directly save lives. There's currently no way for surgeons to help these patients, and we need your help to raise the next round of funding and begin saving these lives. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Great, thanks. If there are any questions, please put it in the chat box. My first question is, when will you be looking to achieve FDA approval?
Yeah, so we're on an expedited regulatory timeline. So we, let me pull up our regulatory path. So we have, we're 510K, many supplemental slides. I'll just walk through. So we are 510K regulatory path right now. And so because we're 510K, we have an 18-month timeline to market. So we have limited testing that we need to do. We don't need to do any clinical testing. And so because of that shortened timeline, we're able to get to market both more cheaply. And then in the next 18 months, we're going to be ready to hit market.
And who are some of the trauma centers and hospitals that are signing up to use it when it comes out?
Yeah, so we are lucky to have come out of Vanderbilt University, which is one of the top trauma centers in the country. Beyond that, too, we have connections with Shock Trauma Maryland, the director of the trauma unit at Shock Trauma Maryland, who is the #1 trauma surgeon in the country, if not the world, who leads the #1 trauma center in the world. He's on our board of advisors. And so he's another one, so Shock Trauma Maryland. We also have Chicago, as well as our 2 trauma surgeons are one's based out of Milwaukee, one's based out of Florida, and so they're centers. So we have these 5 centers that are really poised to launch market.
Question from the audience is, do you have any first-in-human data yet or plan to have some post-510K approval?
Yeah, so that will be a post-510K approval. For us, the FDA it's difficult to get clinical data in the trauma space because you can't consent patients to a clinical trial, and the FDA is aware of that. And so that's one of the reasons why we're on this expedited timeline that doesn't require clinical data prior to. But we're in the first year of launch, we're going to be in these 5 centers and gathering data from these 5 centers, both selling to the 5 centers, but also partnering with them to monitor the success of our device very closely.
And what is the predicate device for the 510K?
Yeah, so our predicate device is Reboa by Prytime Medical, so partial Reboa. So they have the same exact indications of use as us. The difference is that they're a balloon. That's the balloon occlusive device. So there's a balloon that you inflate in the aorta. It's the same from the FDA standpoint. It looks the same, but from a functional trauma surgeon standpoint, it's a very different value proposition to the trauma surgeon. And so we've sort of struck this balance for them where we're able to do a little bit of both. So it works well.
Great. And then what's the dollar value of a unit sale? You know, how profitable is this?
Yeah, so that goes back to the financial slide. So right now we're selling each unit for $6,000 a unit, and that leaves us with a 90% profit margin. And again, that price is it's important to note because also we've talked to hundreds of value analysis committee members at this point at hospitals. And one of the nice things about the space that we operate in, trauma surgery, is that if patients survive long enough to be admitted into the hospital as a residential patient inside of the hospital or the ICU, the hospital will make money. So not only do we offer the hospital substantial profit every time that they use our device, but we also offer them a way to 10x that profit if the patient lives long enough and we have clinical data supporting that we'll have better clinical outcomes. Then that heavily incentivizes the hospital to use our device because the patient lives long enough to continue to be billed by the hospital.
Great. And when we talk about the exit, what strategic has trauma surgery as a call point that would be interested in EndoShunt?
Yeah, so we've been talking with, so Primetime Medical is a close advisor to us. So they're the balloon occlusive device that I was mentioning earlier, and they're also our predicate device. Their CEO is a very close advisor to us. And so one of the things that we've been able to do in that space, and because they're not competitive with us, they have a very different value proposition from a trauma surgeon standpoint, but we've been able to look at some of the companies that have offered acquisitions to them they've turned down. And so that's Boston Scientific, Cook Medical, some of the surgical device companies that have looked at in the past. And they also, it's important to note that immediately following FDA clearance, before any sales, got a $31 million offer from one of the strategic partners prior to any sales. So again, they're a very comparable sort of sized company.
Right. And in reimbursement, you list average reimbursement opportunity at 25K. Is that 90% of the cost or 80% of 50% of the cost? How much does reimbursement really cover in this case?
Yeah, so in this case, I mean, that reimbursement code is for the control of traumatic bleeding using a hemorrhage control device. So it covers the majority of the cost because usually the patient comes in and it's trauma activation, which has a base rate. And so this is just specifically for the control of traumatic bleeding. And our device does that categorically. So obviously there are other costs in addition to the trauma patient, but those are covered by other reimbursement codes. And then again, from a hospital standpoint, as long as the patient lives long enough to be admitted, they make money off of the patient. They make money far exceeding a couple tens of thousands of dollars from this one reimbursement code. And so from our standpoint, the main value that we can show to a hospital is that the patient is more likely to live, because if the patient is more likely to live, then the hospital will make money off of that patient.
Cool. And so what's the next step on the FDA path here? What is the next trial we have to cover to get there?
Yeah, so we have a pre-submission meeting coming up in the next quarter with the FDA. And one of the biggest things that we're going to be validating with that is our specific testing path that we've laid out. So we have a series, we've been working with the same exact regulatory consultant that got our predicate device to market. And so because we are able to see exactly what testing that they had and exactly what results they were able to show to the FDA, we are going to go to the FDA and basically show them all of those results and show them our planned testing and say, basically, will you accept this based on these results? And that will be hopefully a yes, no answer. And hopefully at that point, that will be sort of we'll act from there based on the questions.
Where did the intellectual property come from? Was that Vanderbilt or some other place?
Yeah, so we are lucky enough to own all of the intellectual property directly. It didn't come out of Vanderbilt. We have Cooley as our law firm that filed the intellectual property. So we're pretty robust in terms of our portfolio there. And that's a function of the fact that this technology was invented sort of separately outside of, it wasn't under the sort of umbrella of Vanderbilt, but we were all affiliated with Vanderbilt at the time. But we have letters highlighting that it's not owned by Vanderbilt.
That's great. Did you get any funding from Vanderbilt?
We received some funding, in particular through NSF, through Vanderbilt, but that was after we formed an LLC at that point, and now we're a C Corp. But at the time we formed an LLC, and that did the research behind Endoshine. Again, we've been lucky to have Cooley advising us pretty closely on the legal side of things, so we're pretty robust in terms of the IP
Did you get any
portfolio.
other grant funding from NSF or NIH or anybody else?
Yeah, so we've received some significant grant funding from NSF, not NIH yet, and we've been again, we've been able to do a lot of our studies through military applications, actually. So we work closely with Madigan Medical Center, and this is something that the military has been very interested in. So there's some DoD funding that's come into our company as well.
That's great. Well, we're near the end of our time, guys. Want to thank everybody for a great presentation today. We forgot to run the windmill poll earlier. It's there. If you are interested, please mark that and we'll send you more information or make introductions. And we want to thank Dean Horowitz and Brianna Mariolle for their great presentation on the family office technology space. I want to thank Windmill as well as Tyler there at Endoshunt for a great presentation on up and coming technologies. We'll be back soon for another family office panel next month. Next month, we'll also be in Dallas with the Lion's Den for an in-person family office panel. So we're looking forward to catching up with you guys then. With that, let's go ahead and wrap up for today. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Have a good one. And thanks for taking your time to share with us today.